The woman clutching what looked like a child's toy rifle just demolished 15 moving targets in 12 seconds flat, leaving a room full of Navy SEALs speechless and questioning everything they thought they knew about weapons and warfare. 2 hours earlier, these same elite warriors had been pointing and laughing at her pink and purple painted rifle, calling it a joke and suggesting she belonged at a carnival game instead of their sacred training facility. They had no idea that beneath that seemingly ridiculous exterior lay precision engineering that would make their million-dollar equipment look primitive, wielded by hands that had learned to shoot under circumstances that would haunt their nightmares. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened next would transform ridicule into reverence and teach every person in that room why assumptions can be more dangerous than any enemy they'd ever faced. Because Jessica Chen wasn't just another civilian with delusions of grandeur, she was carrying secrets that the military-industrial complex would kill to possess, and today those secrets would finally see the light of day through the most unlikely weapon anyone had ever witnessed. The morning Pacific fog rolled across the Coronado Naval Base like a gray blanket, shrouding the elite SEAL training compound in the kind of mysterious atmosphere that seemed fitting for a place where America's deadliest warriors honed their craft. Inside the sprawling complex, behind multiple layers of security that kept curious civilians and foreign agents at bay, lay the Advanced Combat Training Center, a facility so classified that most military personnel would never see its interior despite decades of service. This wasn't the kind of place where weekend gun enthusiasts came to play soldier or where hunting buddies gathered to compare their latest purchases. Every square inch of the facility screamed lethal professionalism, from the reinforced concrete walls designed to contain the most powerful weapons in the American arsenal to the sophisticated target systems that could simulate any combat scenario imaginable. The air itself seemed charged with the concentrated testosterone and barely contained violence of men who had stared death in the face and emerged victorious. Commander Jake Morrison ruled this domain with the absolute authority of someone who had earned his position through confirmed kills rather than political maneuvering. His weathered face bore the subtle scars of conflicts that would never appear in official records, and his pale blue eyes held the cold calculation of a predator who had survived by being faster and more ruthless than everyone else. Around him moved his hand-picked team of instructors, each one a legend in their own right, veterans of operations in countries that officially didn't exist on any mission roster. The morning briefing had been routine until Morrison's assistant handed him a folder that made his expression shift from professional indifference to active irritation. A civilian contractor requesting access to their most advanced training protocols, claiming to have developed revolutionary targeting systems that could enhance SEAL effectiveness by 300%. The request had come through channels so high up the military hierarchy that even Morrison couldn't simply dismiss it, despite every instinct telling him that civilians had no business in his world of controlled violence and split-second life-or-death decisions. Master Chief Tony Rodriguez had seen the folder over Morrison's shoulder and immediately felt the familiar surge of protective anger that had kept him alive through 8 combat deployments. His massive frame, sculpted by decades of carrying equipment that would crush ordinary men, tensed with the automatic hostility he reserved for anyone who might endanger his teams. Rodriguez had lost too many good men to incompetent leadership and untested equipment to have any patience for another Pentagon experiment that would probably get people killed while advancing some bureaucrat's career. Lieutenant Bobby Kim felt the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach as he watched the senior officers react to whatever information the folder contained. As the newest member of the instructor cadre, Kim lived in constant fear of making a mistake that would prove he didn't belong among these titans of warfare. His Korean-American heritage had already marked him as different in a community that valued conformity above almost everything else, and he had learned to navigate the subtle prejudices and casual racism with a smile and an eagerness to prove his worth that sometimes made him compromise his own values. The woman who walked through their heavily guarded entrance at exactly 0800 hours looked like she had taken a wrong turn on her way to a children's birthday party. Jessica Chen appeared to be in her early 30s, with shoulder-length black hair tied back in a practical ponytail and wearing civilian clothes that screamed tourist rather than military contractor.
Territory, board, 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 oh, board, 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 three, board, 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 P, board, 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 board.
Her jeans were faded but clean, her hiking boots looked well used but not tactical, and her oversized backpack seemed more appropriate for a weekend camping trip than a demonstration of advanced weapons technology. But it was the case she carried that drew every eye in the room and immediately triggered a wave of barely suppressed laughter. The rifle case was bright pink with purple trim, decorated with what appeared to be cartoon unicorns and rainbows, looking like something a 6-year-old girl might use to carry her toys to a playdate. The contrast between the serious military and the seemingly absurd civilian accessory was so stark that several of the younger SEALs had to bite their lips to keep from laughing out loud. Morrison felt his blood pressure rising as he watched this apparent joke of a woman approach his desk with the kind of confident stride that suggested she actually belonged in his facility. Everything about her presence violated the sacred atmosphere of his domain, from her civilian clothes to her ridiculous equipment case to the way she seemed completely unaware of how out of place she looked among warriors who had earned their right to be here through blood and sacrifice. The psychological dynamics in the room shifted dramatically as Jessica's appearance triggered deep-seated prejudices and insecurities that most of the men didn't even realize they possessed. Rodriguez saw in her small frame and civilian demeanor a reminder of everyone he had failed to protect, civilians who had died because they trusted their safety to professionals who sometimes weren't professional enough. His protective instincts transformed into aggressive hostility as his mind automatically categorized her as a potential liability who would endanger his teams through ignorance and overconfidence. Kim's reaction was more complex and more painful. Looking at Jessica's Asian features and civilian clothes, he was instantly reminded of his own family's immigrant struggles and the casual dismissal they had faced from Americans who assumed they didn't belong. But instead of feeling solidarity with someone who might share similar experiences, Kim felt embarrassed and angry that another Asian person was making them all look bad by showing up unprepared and inappropriate for such a serious environment. His desperate need for acceptance by his peers overrode any ethnic loyalty, and he found himself hoping she would fail quickly so the embarrassment would end. The whispered comments began immediately as Jessica approached Morrison's desk with a polite smile that seemed completely oblivious to the hostile environment surrounding her. Sergeant First Class Mike Torres, a sniper with 43 confirmed kills, muttered just loudly enough for others to hear that maybe the Pentagon had finally lost its mind completely, sending them a kindergarten teacher with a toy gun to teach them about combat effectiveness. His comment drew chuckles from the younger SEALs, who were always eager to show their solidarity with the senior enlisted men. Staff Sergeant Chris Johnson, whose massive frame and aggressive demeanor had earned him the nickname Bulldozer during his 3 tours in Iraq, wondered aloud if they should call base security to escort the lost civilian back to the visitor center before she hurt herself trying to operate military equipment. His voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who had never learned to see civilians as anything more than potential casualties or obstacles to mission completion. Petty Officer Second Class Danny Walsh, still nursing wounded pride from a recent training exercise where his marksmanship scores had been embarrassingly low, saw an opportunity to rebuild his reputation by mocking someone who was obviously even less qualified than he was. His loud suggestion that they should probably check her unicorn rifle for safety violations because it might shoot rainbows instead of bullets earned him the laughter he craved and temporarily masked his own insecurities about his declining performance. Jessica's response to the increasingly hostile atmosphere was a calm professionalism that only seemed to irritate the assembled warriors even more. She introduced herself with the kind of polite formality that suggested she either didn't notice their hostility or didn't care about it, requesting permission to demonstrate the advanced targeting system that had brought her to their facility. Her voice carried a slight accent that some of the men immediately identified as foreign, adding another layer of suspicion and resentment to their growing list of reasons to dismiss her. Morrison's interrogation began with the kind of aggressive questioning designed to expose incompetence and send civilians running back to their safe little worlds. He demanded to know her military enlister experience, her qualifications for handling advanced weapons systems, and her security clearance level, each question delivered with the crushing authority of someone who had never been successfully challenged by a civilian contractor. His tone suggested that he already knew she would fail to meet even the most basic requirement and was simply going through the motions before having her escorted off the base. Jessica's answers were disappointingly mundane and completely inadequate by military standards. No formal military service, though she mentioned some civilian marksmanship training that Morrison immediately dismissed as irrelevant. A bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from a state university that none of the SEALs had ever heard of, hardly the kind of prestigious credentials they expected from someone claiming to revolutionize their weapons systems. Security clearance that was barely sufficient for contractor work, nothing like the top-secret classifications that govern most of their advanced equipment. The one detail that caught Morrison's attention was her employment history with a small defense contractor called Precision Dynamics, a company he vaguely remembered from budget meetings as one of the many small firms that survived by developing specialized components for larger military suppliers. Jessica's explanation that she had spent the last 5 years developing targeting solutions for various government clients sounded like the kind of vague corporate speak that usually meant someone had been shuffling paperwork and attending meetings rather than creating anything useful. Rodriguez's skepticism reached new heights when Jessica began unpacking her equipment with the same careful attention to detail that he used when preparing for combat operations. But instead of the familiar black and tan colors of professional military gear, everything she revealed was decorated in the same absurd pink and purple theme as her rifle case. Her rangefinder looked like a child's toy, her ballistic calculator appeared to be housed in a bright pink plastic case that belonged in a dollar store, and even her ammunition containers were decorated with cartoon characters that made them look like lunchboxes. The psychological effect of her equipment's appearance on the assembled SEALs was immediate and profound. Men who had faced enemy fire without flinching found themselves struggling to maintain their composure in the face of what appeared to be a complete mockery of everything they held sacred. The weapons and equipment that defined their professional identity were utilitarian and deadly serious, designed to project competence and inspire confidence in life-or-death situations. Jessica's colorful toys seemed to mock that seriousness and reduce their deadly profession to the level of a children's game. Kim's embarrassment reached a breaking point as he watched his fellow SEALs react to Jessica's equipment with increasingly open contempt. His own insecurities about belonging in this elite community made him desperate to distance himself from any association with someone who was so obviously out of place. The fact that Jessica shared his Asian heritage only made the situation more painful, as he imagined his teammates viewing her failures as somehow representative of his own limitations and unworthiness. The moment that defined the morning's tone came when Jessica finally revealed her rifle, and the collective intake of breath from the assembled warriors carried equal parts shock and outrage. The weapon itself appeared to be built on a standard AR-15 platform, but every visible surface had been painted in bright pink with purple accents and decorative flourishes that made it look like something from a little girl's fantasy rather than a precision instrument of warfare. The scope was encased in matching pink housing, the stock was decorated with unicorn decals, and even the sling was woven in pastel colors that hurt the eyes of men accustomed to tactical black and olive drab. Morrison's reaction was swift and brutal, his voice cutting through the room like a blade as he expressed his complete disgust with what he was seeing. This wasn't just unprofessional, it was insulting to every man and woman who had ever carried a weapon in defense of their country. The idea that someone would take a tool designed to protect American lives and turn it into a child's toy demonstrated a fundamental lack of understanding about the gravity of their profession and the respect owed to those who had died carrying similar weapons. Torres's comment about calling the circus to report a missing clown drew appreciative laughter from the younger SEALs, while Johnson wondered aloud if the Pentagon had decided to start recruiting from toy stores instead of military academies. Walsh suggested that maybe Jessica's rifle shot confetti instead of bullets, and wouldn't it be hilarious to watch her try to take down targets with party favors instead of ammunition. The betting began almost immediately, with various SEALs wagering on how quickly Jessica would realize she was in over her head and ask to leave. The odds heavily favored her quitting within the first 10 minutes, with some of the more optimistic warriors giving her credit for lasting as long as 20 minutes before the reality of her situation became unbearable. The atmosphere shifted from professional skepticism to cruel entertainment as the assembled men began to view Jessica's inevitable failure as a source of amusement rather than a waste of their valuable training time. Rodriguez's protective instincts transformed into aggressive hostility as he began to see Jessica not just as incompetent but as actively dangerous to his teams. In his experience, overconfident civilians were responsible for more military casualties than enemy action, and Jessica's complete obliviousness to her own inadequacy made her a threat that needed to be neutralized quickly and decisively. His suggestion that they should probably have medical personnel standing by in case she hurt herself with her toy gun was delivered with the kind of casual cruelty that masked genuine concern for the safety of his men. The range safety briefing that Morrison delivered was deliberately intimidating, designed to overwhelm civilians with the complexity and danger of military weapon systems. He explained in excruciating detail the potential for catastrophic injury or death, the legal consequences of safety violations, and the immediate expulsion that would result from any deviation from protocol. His tone suggested that he expected Jessica to recognize her limitations and withdraw before she could embarrass herself further or endanger the professionals around her. Jessica's calm acceptance of the safety briefing and her methodical preparation for the demonstration only seemed to increase the hostility directed toward her. Her apparent inability to recognize the seriousness of her situation frustrated men who were accustomed to having civilians defer to their expertise and acknowledge their superior knowledge. Instead of showing the proper respect and intimidation that Morrison's briefing was designed to inspire, Jessica simply nodded politely and continued preparing her equipment with the same careful attention to detail that characterized everything she did. The transformation of the training facility from a place of professional development into a theater of anticipated humiliation created an atmosphere thick with tension and barely suppressed excitement. The assembled SEALs had been provided with unexpected entertainment, a chance to watch civilian incompetence exposed in spectacular fashion while reinforcing their own sense of superiority and professional competence. Cell phones appeared as various warriors prepared to document what they expected to be a viral video of civilian overconfidence meeting military reality. Kim's internal conflict reached a crescendo as he watched his teammates prepare to humiliate someone who reminded him of his own family's struggles with acceptance and belonging. His desire in with his military peers warred with the values his immigrant parents had taught him about treating others with dignity and respect.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The easy path was to join in the mockery and demonstrate his loyalty to his teammates, but something about Jessica's quiet dignity and professional demeanor reminded him of his grandmother's quiet strength in the face of prejudice and dismissal. Torres began questioning his own equipment choices as he watched Jessica's pink rifle consistently outperform the weapons that he had considered state-of-the-art. The possibility that civilian contractors might have access to technology that exceeded military specifications challenged his understanding of the military-industrial complex and raised uncomfortable questions about whether elite military units were actually receiving the best available equipment. Johnson's adaptation strategy involved minimizing the importance of marksmanship and overall combat effectiveness, emphasizing physical conditioning and aggressive tactics as more relevant to SEAL operations. However, his own experiences in combat had demonstrated the critical importance of accurate shooting under pressure, and Jessica's performance was forcing him to confront the gap between his preferred self-image and his actual capabilities. The range safety protocols that Morrison had explained in intimidating detail were being followed flawlessly by Jessica, whose adherence to proper procedures exceeded what he typically observed from military personnel. Her weapon handling was smooth and confident, her awareness of downrange safety was constant, and her communication with range personnel was professional and precise. These observations were gradually forcing Morrison to acknowledge that Jessica's civilian status might not indicate incompetence after all. Kim found himself studying Jessica's technique for elements that he might incorporate into his own shooting, despite the psychological difficulty of learning from someone he had initially dismissed as inferior. Her stance modifications were subtle but effective, her sight alignment procedures were more systematic than what he had been taught, and her breathing techniques appeared to provide better stability than military standard methods. The electronic target systems continued providing objective data that confirmed what visual observation suggested. Jessica's performance was not just good for a civilian but would have been exceptional for experienced military personnel. Her group sizes were tighter than what most snipers achieved, her precision was consistent across different shooting positions, and her accuracy under time pressure exceeded qualification standards by significant margins. Walsh's psychological coping mechanism involved searching for external factors that might explain Jessica's performance in ways that preserved his own sense of competence. Perhaps the targets were closer than they appeared, or the wind conditions were unusually favorable, or the electronic scoring system was malfunctioning in her favor. However, the objective evidence continued accumulating in support of Jessica's genuine skill despite his desperate search for alternative explanations. The crowd's reaction was evolving from hostile mockery through uncomfortable silence towards something approaching respectful attention as Jessica's demonstration progressed.
Those with genuine shooting experience were beginning to appreciate the technical elements of her performance, while others were struggling to reconcile her continued success with their initial assumptions about civilian capabilities and appropriate equipment choices. Morrison found his strategic assessment shifting toward intelligence gathering as he recognized that Jessica's presence might represent an opportunity rather than an annoyance. If civilian contractors had developed technology that exceeded military specifications, understanding those advances could provide significant tactical advantages. His hostility was giving way to professional curiosity as he began viewing Jessica as a potential resource rather than an unwelcome intrusion. Rodriguez's protective instincts were being recalibrated as he recognized that Jessica might be capable of protecting others rather than requiring protection herself. His worldview had been built on clear distinctions between those who needed protection and those capable of providing it, but Jessica's demonstration was suggesting that those categories might be more fluid than he had assumed. The qualification course's final stages would test Jessica's performance under maximum stress and technical challenge, providing the ultimate assessment of whether her earlier success represented genuine competence or favorable circumstances. The assembled SEALs found themselves hoping for different outcomes than they had anticipated, with professional curiosity beginning to overcome personal prejudice as they recognized the potential value of understanding Jessica's capabilities. The afternoon sun was beginning to burn through the coastal fog as Jessica prepared for the most challenging portion of the demonstration, her pink rifle gleaming in the improved lighting while the assembled observers waited to see whether her exceptional performance could continue under maximum pressure. The morning that had begun with such confident contempt was becoming something entirely different, forcing everyone present to confront their assumptions about competence, equipment, and the nature of military superiority itself. The silence was broken by the arrival of Colonel Patricia Harrison, whose unannounced appearance at the training facility sent ripples of tension through the assembled crowd. Harrison commanded the Naval Special Warfare Development Group with an iron fist and a reputation for knowing everything that happened within her jurisdiction before anyone else did. Her presence at what should have been a routine contractor demonstration suggested that Jessica Chen's visit was far more significant than anyone had realized. Harrison's weathered face carried the authority of someone who had earned her position through 3 decades of military service in an environment that rarely welcomed women in leadership roles. Her gray eyes swept across the gathered SEALs with the kind of analytical precision that had made her legendary among those who served under her command. When her gaze settled on Jessica, something shifted in her expression that made Morrison's stomach clench with sudden apprehension. The contractor demonstration that had seemed like a minor annoyance was suddenly taking on the dimensions of a career-defining moment as Harrison approached Jessica with the kind of respectful attention she typically reserved for visiting generals or foreign military dignitaries. Morrison found himself scrambling to understand how his morning had transformed from dealing with an incompetent civilian into hosting what appeared to be a classified briefing with his commanding officer, but of an Embrian. Harrison's first words to Jessica carried none of the dismissive tone that had characterized the morning's interactions. Instead, she addressed the woman with the formal courtesy typically reserved for equals or superiors, asking if the demonstration was proceeding according to plan and whether the facility's resources were adequate for Jessica's requirements. The implication that Jessica's needs took precedence over standard operating procedures sent shockwaves through personnel who had spent the morning treating her as an unwelcome intruder. Rodriguez felt the familiar sensation of the ground shifting beneath his feet as he recognized the signs of a situation that was far more complex than it had initially appeared. Harrison's body language suggested familiarity with Jessica that went beyond routine contractor relationships, and her careful attention to protocol indicated that significant interests were at stake. The protective hostility he had directed toward Jessica was beginning to feel dangerously inappropriate given the colonel's obvious respect for their civilian visitor. Torres found himself studying the interaction between Harrison and Jessica for clues about the real nature of the morning's events. The colonel's questions were specific and technical, focusing on performance parameters and system capabilities rather than basic competence assessments. Her familiarity with Jessica's equipment specifications suggested prior briefings that had not been shared with the facility's regular personnel, adding another layer of confusion to an already perplexing situation. Kim's psychological discomfort intensified as he realized that his mockery of Jessica might have been witnessed by someone whose opinion could influence his entire military career. Harrison's reputation for remembering everything and holding grudges indefinitely made his earlier comments feel like potential suicide for his prospects of advancement within the special operations community. The casual racism and cultural insensitivity that had seemed acceptable among his peers now felt like evidence of judgment lapses that could haunt him for years. Johnson's aggressive confidence evaporated entirely as he watched Harrison treat Jessica with the kind of deference typically reserved for technical experts whose knowledge was considered strategically valuable. The morning's entertainment was revealing itself to be something far more serious than civilian incompetence, and his loud comments about toy guns and kindergarten teachers were beginning to feel like the words of someone who had catastrophically misread the situation. Walsh's attempt to blend into the background was unsuccessful as Harrison's attention swept across the assembled personnel with the kind of systematic assessment that missed nothing. His earlier jokes about confetti ammunition and safety violations now seemed like evidence of unprofessional behavior in the presence of someone whose work was obviously considered important by the highest levels of military command. The casual cruelty that had earned laughs from his peers was transforming into potential career damage. Morrison's attempt to reassert control over the situation was met with Harrison's polite but firm redirection toward Jessica, making it clear that the civilian contractor was driving the morning's agenda rather than following military protocols. The power dynamics that had seemed so clear just hours earlier were completely inverted, with Jessica occupying a position of authority that Morrison was only beginning to understand. The revelation began with Harrison's casual reference to Jessica's previous work with the Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, an organization whose involvement in any project automatically elevated its classification level and strategic importance. The mention of DARPA sent another wave of unease through personnel who were beginning to realize that they had been treating someone with connections to the most sensitive military research programs as if she were a lost tourist. Harrison's technical discussion with Jessica revealed the depth of her involvement in classified weapons development programs that exceeded the security clearance level of most personnel present. Her casual references to ballistic coefficient optimization, advanced materials engineering, and integrated targeting systems suggested expertise that belonged in university labs rather than civilian shooting ranges. The pink unicorn rifle was beginning to look less like a joke and more like a sophisticated testing platform for technology that might revolutionize military capabilities. Rodriguez's worldview continued crumbling as Harrison's briefing revealed that Jessica's civilian status masked involvement in special access programs that supported the most elite military units in the American arsenal. Her work with Precision Dynamics was apparently a cover identity for research activities that required the highest levels of security classification, and her presence at their facility represented field testing of systems that might determine the future effectiveness of special operations forces. The technical specifications that Harrison discussed with Jessica were incomprehensible to most of the assembled personnel, but those with engineering backgrounds began recognizing references to technologies that exceeded anything in their current inventory. Her rifle's performance was apparently the result of materials science advances and manufacturing techniques that represented years of classified research funded by budgets that exceeded the operating costs of entire military bases. Torres found himself re-evaluating every assumption he had made about military superiority and technology, as Harrison's conversation revealed that civilian contractors might have access to equipment that made standard military weapons look primitive. The possibility that his professional expertise was built on outdated technology challenged fundamental assumptions about his own competence and the value of his specialized training. Kim's cultural shame deepened as he realized that his dismissal of Jessica had been based on ethnic stereotypes that had blinded him to obvious indicators of her professional competence. Harrison's respectful treatment of the Asian woman stood in stark contrast to his own prejudiced assumptions, forcing him to confront biases that he had absorbed despite his own immigrant background and the discrimination his family had faced. Johnson's identity crisis accelerated as Harrison's technical discussion revealed that physical intimidation and aggressive posturing were irrelevant to the kind of precision warfare that Jessica's technology represented. His entire military persona had been built around the assumption that size and strength were primary determinants of combat effectiveness, but Jessica's demonstration was proving that intelligence and technical sophistication could overcome physical advantages in ways that made his approach obsolete. The crowd's reaction shifted from uncomfortable attention to genuine apprehension as Harrison's briefing continued, revealing the scope of Jessica's involvement in programs that affected national security at the highest levels. Personnel who had been treating the morning as entertainment were beginning to understand that they might have compromised their own security clearances through inappropriate behavior towards someone whose work was considered strategically critical. Morrison's damage assessment was becoming increasingly urgent as he realized that his treatment of Jessica had been witnessed by personnel who might report their observations to security investigators. His hostile reception of someone with Harrison's obvious respect could be interpreted as evidence of judgment failures that would disqualify him from positions requiring discretion and professionalism. The morning's events were transforming from routine annoyance into potential career destruction. Walsh's psychological retreat into invisibility was unsuccessful as Harrison's systematic attention to detail ensured that everyone's behavior was being noted and evaluated. His crude jokes and unprofessional comments were taking on the weight of security violations that could result in formal disciplinary action and potential loss of security clearance. The casual cruelty that had seemed harmless among peers was revealing itself to be evidence of character flaws that disqualified him from positions of trust. Harrison's revelation that Jessica's pink rifle represented the culmination of a 5-year research program funded by congressional appropriations exceeding $50 million transformed the morning's mockery into something approaching criminal negligence. The assembled personnel were beginning to understand that they had been treating billions of dollars in advanced research as if it were a children's toy, demonstrating professional incompetence that could have consequences extending far beyond their individual career. The psychological impact of learning that Jessica's work supported operations in classified conflict zones was devastating for personnel who had built their identities around being the tip of the spear in America's military operations. Her civilian status had masked involvement in activities that exceeded their own operational experience, forcing them to confront the possibility that the most important military work was being conducted by people they had never heard of using methods they didn't understand. Rodriguez's protective instincts underwent complete inversion as he realized that Jessica might be one of the people responsible for keeping him alive during combat operations. Her research into precision targeting systems and advanced ballistics could have provided the technological edge that had allowed his teams to complete missions that might otherwise have resulted in casualties. The hostile reception he had given someone who might have saved his life was creating psychological trauma that would require years to process. Torres's professional identity as an elite sniper was being challenged by the realization that Jessica's research had probably contributed to targeting systems that exceeded his own capabilities. Her civilian status had concealed involvement in the development of technologies that made his specialized training seem primitive, compelling him to confront the possibility that his expertise was becoming obsolete in the face of advancing automation and artificial intelligence. Kim's immigrant background added additional layers of shame as he realized that his rejection of Jessica had been based on ethnic prejudices that betrayed every principle his family had taught him about respecting education and technical achievement. His desperate desire for acceptance by his military peers had led him to abandon cultural values that emphasized learning and intellectual accomplishments in favor of conformity with biases that his parents would have found abhorrent. Johnson's aggressive posturing was revealed to be completely irrelevant to the kind of warfare that Jessica's technology forcing him to confront the possibility that his entire in favor addition of Tays was built around capabilities that were becoming obsolete. Her demonstration of precision and technical sophistication suggested that future military effectiveness would depend on intelligence and training rather than physical intimidation and aggressiveness. The revelation that Jessica's demonstration was actually a classified field test of prototype systems destined for deployment with the most elite military units added another dimension of professional humiliation for personnel who had treated her as entertainment. Their behavior had been observed and evaluated by someone whose recommendations could influence equipment decisions affecting thousands of military personnel, making their morning's attainment a potential factor in strategic planning at the highest levels of government. Harrison's final revelation that Jessica's work had already saved American lives in combat operations that remained classified created a moment of silence so profound that the distant sound of ocean waves could be heard across the training facility. The assembled SEALs were forced to confront the possibility that their hostile treatment had been directed towards someone whose contributions to military effectiveness exceeded their own. Despite her civilian status and unconventional appearance, the transformation from contempt to comprehension was complete.
Jessica's true demonstration was only beginning, and what she revealed next would forever change how everyone present understood the relationship between appearance and capability, between conventional wisdom and revolutionary advancement, between the obvious and the extraordinary.
Harrison's announcement that Jessica would now demonstrate the full capabilities of her prototype system sent a chill through the assembled personnel who were still processing the implications of everything they had learned. The qualification course that had seemed so challenging earlier was apparently just the warm-up for a demonstration that would showcase technology years ahead of anything in their current arsenal. The pink unicorn rifle that had been the source of so much mockery was about to reveal capabilities that would redefine their understanding of what was possible in precision warfare. Jessica's preparation for the final demonstration was methodical and professional, her movements displaying the kind of systematic attention to detail that characterized someone accustomed to working with equipment worth more than most people's homes. She began unpacking additional components from her seemingly innocent backpack, each piece revealing itself to be a sophisticated electronic system disguised by the same pink and purple color scheme that had made everything appear so harmless. The target array that Jessica requested was unlike anything the facility typically employed for standard training exercises. Instead of stationary bullseyes or simple moving targets, she asked for a complex scenario that included multiple moving objects at varying distances, some approaching and others retreating, with wind patterns that would challenge even experienced snipers under optimal conditions. The technical difficulty of what she was proposing exceeded anything that most of the assembled personnel had ever attempted, even during their most advanced training programs. Morrison found himself approving the target configuration despite his continued bewilderment about the morning's events, his professional curiosity overriding his personal discomfort as he recognized an opportunity to witness something that might represent the future of military precision systems. The hostile environment he had created was transforming into something approaching a laboratory demonstration, with Jessica as the principal investigator and his personnel as unwitting test subjects for advanced psychological and technical assessment. Rodriguez's psychological adaptation was accelerating as he watched Jessica's systematic preparation for what was obviously a demonstration of capabilities that exceeded conventional military training. His protective instincts were being recalibrated to recognize that Jessica might represent an asset that required protection rather than a liability that needed management. The morning's events were forcing him to reconsider fundamental assumptions about who belonged in military environments and what qualifications actually mattered for mission success. The electronic systems that Jessica connected to her rifle revealed themselves to be far more sophisticated than anything the assembled personnel had encountered in their operational experience. The targeting computer appeared to be capable of real-time ballistic calculations that incorporated atmospheric conditions, target movement patterns, and weapon system characteristics in ways that exceeded the capabilities of equipment costing millions of dollars. The pink plastic housing that had seemed so ridiculous was apparently protecting technology that represented the cutting edge of military research. Torres began studying Jessica's equipment setup with the fascination of someone witnessing revolutionary advancement in his professional field. The integration between her rifle's mechanical systems and the electronic components was seamless in ways that suggested manufacturing techniques not available through conventional military suppliers. Her targeting solution was apparently capable of processing information faster and more accurately than human calculation, potentially eliminating the years of training required to develop expert marksmanship skills. Kim's identity crisis was reaching its conclusion as he watched Jessica's professional competence render his own specialized training obsolete in ways that forced him to confront the possibility that his entire military career might be built on approaches that were becoming irrelevant. Her demonstration was revealing that technical sophistication could overcome the physical and psychological advantages that military training was designed to develop, making his desperate quest for acceptance among elite warriors seem tragically misguided. Johnson's aggressive posturing had been completely abandoned as he recognized that Jessica's capabilities transcended any category of military effectiveness he understood. Her quiet confidence was more intimidating than any display of physical dominance he had ever witnessed, and her systematic approach to problem-solving suggested intelligence and preparation that made his preferred methods of intimidation seem primitive and counterproductive. Walsh's attempt to become invisible was unsuccessful as Jessica's demonstration continued attracting attention from throughout the facility, drawing additional observers who were eager to witness what was being described as a revolutionary advancement in weapons technology. His earlier mockery was taking on the weight of historical significance as one of the last examples of conventional military thinking before a paradigm shift that would change everything. The countdown to Jessica's ultimate demonstration created an atmosphere of tension that exceeded what most of the assembled personnel experienced during actual combat operations. The stakes had escalated far beyond personal embarrassment or professional competence to include potential obsolescence of their entire approach to military training and operational effectiveness. They were about to witness either the vindication of conventional wisdom or its complete destruction through technological advancement. Harrison's final briefing revealed that Jessica's demonstration would be recorded and analyzed by technical experts from multiple government agencies, adding another layer of pressure to an already extraordinary. The morning's entertainment was being transformed into a formal assessment of revolutionary military technology, with the assembled SEALs serving as unwitting test subjects for advanced psychological and performance evaluation systems. Jessica's first target engagement at the maximum demonstration range exceeded the performance parameters of any weapons system the personnel had encountered during their military careers. Her shot placement was not just accurate but demonstrated precision that approached the theoretical limits of mechanical systems, suggesting that her equipment had overcome fundamental constraints that limited conventional military weapons. The electronic target system appeared to be compensating for variables that human shooters couldn't even perceive, let alone calculate. The rapid target acquisition sequence that followed challenged every assumption about the time required for accurate shooting under combat conditions. Jessica's system was apparently capable of engaging multiple targets faster than most personnel could identify them, with accuracy that remained constant despite the speed of engagement. The tactical implications of such capabilities were staggering for military personnel trained to believe that precision and speed were mutually exclusive requirements. Rodriguez found himself calculating the operational advantages that Jessica's technology would provide in combat scenarios, his tactical thinking overcoming his emotional reaction to the morning's revelations. The capability to engage multiple targets with perfect accuracy in seconds rather than minutes could transform the effectiveness of small unit operations in ways that would save American lives and ensure mission success in situations that would otherwise result in casualties. Torres's professional assessment was shifting from skepticism to genuine admiration as he recognized technical achievements that represented decades of advancement beyond current military capabilities. Jessica's target system appeared to be solving ballistic problems that he had spent years learning to estimate through experience and intuition, suggesting that her technology could make expert marksmanship accessible to personnel with minimal training. The psychological impact of Jessica's demonstration was particularly devastating for Kitty Bill, over the assumption that elite status required years of specialized training and exceptional personal qualities. Her technology was proving that civilian contractors with advanced equipment could potentially outperform the most elite military personnel, making his struggle for acceptance seem pointless in the face of approaching technological obsolescence. Johnson's worldview was undergoing complete reconstruction as he watched Jessica's demonstration prove that intelligence and preparation were more valuable than physical strength and aggressive attitude. Her quiet competence was more impressive than any display of dominance he had ever witnessed, and her systematic approach to problem-solving represented a form of strength that he had never learned to recognize or develop. Morrison's strategic assessment was evolving from damage control to intelligence gathering as he recognized that Jessica's demonstration represented opportunities for significant advancement in his unit's capabilities. The hostile reception he had provided was transforming into a professional relationship that could potentially influence his career trajectory in positive ways, assuming he could overcome the negative first impression he had created. The target engagement sequence that Jessica completed using only her rifle's iron sights exceeded the performance that most personnel achieved with advanced optics, demonstrating that her fundamental marksmanship skills were exceptional even without technological assistance. The pink unicorn decorations that had seemed so absurd were apparently camouflaging traditional shooting abilities that would have been impressive by any standard, enhanced by technology that made the combination nearly supernatural in its effectiveness. Walsh's psychological retreat was complete as he recognized that his earlier mockery had been directed towards someone whose capabilities exceeded anything he had encountered during his military career. The casual cruelty that had seemed acceptable among peers was revealed to be evidence of judgment failures that could influence his professional reputation for years to come. Assuming anyone remembered his contributions to the morning's hostility, Harrison's technical discussion with Jessica revealed additional capabilities that had not been demonstrated during the formal testing sequence, suggesting that what they had witnessed represented only a fraction of her system's potential effectiveness. The classification level of some capabilities apparently exceeded the security clearance of personnel present, adding another dimension of professional exclusion to an already humbling experience. The ripple effects of Jessica's demonstration began extending beyond the immediate audience as word spread throughout the military community about technological advances that would transform conventional approaches to training and operations. Her work was apparently part of a larger research program that would eventually influence equipment decisions affecting thousands of military personnel, making the morning's events a preview of fundamental changes approaching the entire defense establishment. Rodriguez's adaptation to Jessica's capabilities included recognition that his protective instincts should be directed toward ensuring her safety and supporting her work rather than shielding others from perceived civilian incompetence. The morning's revelation was forcing him to reconsider who required protection in military environments and what qualifications actually determined someone's value to operational effectiveness. Torres began questioning his own equipment choices and training methodologies as he recognized that Jessica's approach to marksmanship was more advanced than anything he had encountered during his specialized training. Her integration of traditional shooting skills with advanced technology represented a synthesis that exceeded what military training programs were providing to their most elite personnel, suggesting that civilian contractors might have better access to cutting-edge techniques than active duty specialists. Kim's cultural background added additional complexity to his psychological adaptation as he recognized that Jessica's achievements validated the educational values and technical sophistication that his immigrant family had always emphasized. His rejection of those principles in favor of military conformity was being revealed as a strategic error that had prevented him from recognizing excellence when it appeared in unexpected forms. Johnson's aggressive identity was being replaced by something approaching humility as he recognized that Jessica's quiet confidence was more impressive than any display of physical dominance he had ever witnessed. Her systematic approach to problem-solving and methodical preparation resurrected work, forcing him to reconsider what actually constituted military effectiveness. The long-term implications of Jessica's demonstration were beginning to pound the consciousness of personnel who were realizing their entire approach to military training might be obsolete within years rather than decades. Her technology was apparently a revolution in defense capabilities that would change fundamental assumptions about personnel requirements. First, training methodologies and operational effectiveness in ways that would affect the entire military establishment. Morrison's career concerns were expanding beyond personal damage control to include recognition that his facility might become a center for testing advanced technologies that could influence his professional trajectory for decades. The hostile reception he had provided was potentially the beginning of a relationship that could determine his relevance in a military environment increasingly dominated by civilian contractors with advanced technical capabilities. Walsh's professional future was becoming increasingly uncertain. He realized that his approach to military service was based on assumptions that were being challenged by technological advances he didn't understand. The casual aggression and crude humor that had defined his military identity were being revealed as evidence of intellectual limitations that could prevent him from adapting to changing requirements for military effectiveness. The transformation that had begun with mockery and contempt was reaching its completion through recognition and respect that Jessica's influence on the assembled personnel would extend far beyond a single district. Her work represented the future of military effectiveness, and everyone present would carry the memory of this morning for the remainder of their careers, whether as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prejudgment or as inspiration for embracing technological advancement and intellectual humility. Harrison's final assessment of the demonstration confirmed that Jessica's prototype had exceeded all performance expectations and would be recommended for immediate integration into special operations training programs. The pink unicorn rifle that had been the source of so much mockery would soon become the template for equipment that would protect American lives and ensure mission success in conflicts that had not yet begun. Jessica's quiet approach from the facility was markedly different from her morning arrival, with personnel who had mocked her equipment now requesting information about training opportunities and technical specifications. The civilian contractor who had seemed so out of place was leaving behind a transformed understanding of what constituted military effectiveness and who deserved respect in environments where lives depended on split-second decisions and perfect execution. The legacy of Jessica's visit would extend far beyond the immediate audience to influence training methodologies, equipment procurement decisions, and personnel evaluation criteria throughout the special operations community. Her demonstration had proven that revolutionary advances in military capability could emerge from unexpected sources disguised by appearances that concealed rather than revealed their true significance. The morning that had begun with confident assumptions about civilian incompetence was ending with humbled recognition that the future of military effectiveness might depend on embracing rather than rejecting innovations that challenged conventional wisdom. Jessica Chen had accomplished more than just demonstrating advanced technology. She had forced an entire facility of elite warriors to confront their own limitations and biases in ways that would influence their professional development for years to come. The pink unicorn rifle that had seemed so absurd would be remembered not as a joke but as a symbol of the danger inherent in judging capabilities by appearances. The quiet woman who had endured their mockery with professional dignity would be remembered as someone who had revolutionized their understanding of what was possible when intelligence and preparation were combined with advanced technology and systematic training. As Jessica's vehicle disappeared beyond the facility's security perimeter, the assembled personnel began the difficult process of adapting to a world where their most fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness had been challenged and found wanting. The transformation from contempt to comprehension was complete, but the implications of what they had witnessed would continue influencing their professional development long after the morning's events had become military legend. 3 months after Jessica's demonstration, the Coronado Naval Base had become the epicenter of a quiet revolution in military training methodologies that was spreading throughout the special operations community like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. The Advanced Combat Training Center bore little resemblance to the testosterone-fueled environment that had greeted Jessica that foggy morning, transformed instead into a laboratory where traditional military thinking was being systematically challenged and rebuilt from the ground up. Morrison's office walls now displayed technical schematics and performance charts that would have been incomprehensible to him before Jessica's visit, each document representing another piece of the puzzle that was reshaping his understanding of what constituted effective military leadership. His transformation from hostile commander to eager student had been gradual but complete, driven by recognition that his facility was becoming the testing ground for technologies that would determine the future effectiveness of Fort Walls. The pink unicorn rifle had been replaced by a series of prototype weapons that maintained Jessica's distinctive color scheme while incorporating increasingly sophisticated targeting systems that pushed the boundaries of what was technically feasible. Each new iteration demonstrated capabilities that exceeded the previous version, suggesting that Jessica's initial demonstration had been deliberately conservative to avoid overwhelming personnel who were struggling to adapt to paradigm-shifting revelations about civilian technological capabilities. Rodriguez found himself serving as the primary liaison between Jessica's research team and the facility's operational personnel, his protective instincts having been completely redirected toward ensuring the success of programs that he now recognized as critical to saving American lives in future conflicts. His role had evolved from skeptical observer to enthusiastic advocate as he witnessed firsthand how Jessica's innovations were transforming ordinary personnel into marksmen whose capabilities exceeded what had previously been considered possible only for elite specialists. The training protocols that Jessica had developed challenged every assumption about the time and effort required to achieve expert marksmanship skills, demonstrating that advanced technology could compress years of traditional training into weeks of intensive instruction. Her systematic approach to skill development was revealing that many of the difficulties associated with precision shooting were artifacts of outdated training methodologies rather than fundamental limitations of human capability. Torres had become Jessica's most dedicated student, spending every available hour studying the technical principles that governed her targeting systems while practicing techniques that integrated traditional marksmanship skills with advanced electronic assistance.
His transformation from skeptical sniper to technology evangelist was complete, driven by recognition that Jessica's innovations represented evolution rather than replacement of the skills that had defined his professional identity. The psychological impact of Jessica's visit had extended far beyond the immediate witnesses to influence personnel throughout the special operations community who were struggling to adapt to changing requirements for military effectiveness. Stories of the pink unicorn rifle had become legend among those who understood that revolutionary advances in capability often emerged from unexpected sources disguised by appearances that concealed their true significance.
Kim's personal transformation had been the most dramatic of any personnel affected by Jessica's demonstration, his desperate quest for acceptance having been replaced by quiet confidence based on genuine competence rather than conformity to group prejudices. His cultural background had become a source of strength rather than shame as he recognized that the educational values his family had emphasized were precisely the qualities needed to thrive in an environment increasingly dominated by technological sophistication. The facility's culture had undergone fundamental changes that extended far beyond equipment and training procedures to include basic assumptions about respect, competence, and the sources of military effectiveness. Personnel who had once valued physical intimidation and aggressive posturing were learning to appreciate intellectual precision and systematic preparation as more reliable indicators of professional capability. Johnson's aggressive identity had been completely reconstructed around principles of methodical preparation and technical excellence that Jessica had demonstrated during her visit. His transformation from bulldozer to thoughtful practitioner had been gradual but complete, driven by recognition that true strength was demonstrated through competence rather than intimidation and that the most effective warriors were often those who appeared least threatening to conventional assessment. The ripple effects of Jessica's work were becoming visible throughout the military community as personnel trained at Coronado carried their new understanding of technological integration to other facilities and operational units. Her influence was spreading through informal networks of professionals who recognized that they had witnessed something historically significant that would reshape their entire profession within a generation. Walsh had requested transfer to a different facility within weeks of Jessica's demonstration, unable to reconcile his crude humor and casual aggression with an environment that increasingly valued intellectual sophistication and respectful collaboration. His departure had been voluntary but necessary, representing the self-selection process through which military culture was adapting to changing requirements for effectiveness in technologically advanced warfare. Harrison's strategic planning now incorporated assumptions about civilian contractor capabilities that would have seemed fantastical before Jessica's visit, reflecting broader changes in defense procurement and development strategies that recognized the growing importance of private sector innovation in maintaining American military superiority. The traditional boundaries between military and civilian expertise were dissolving as advanced technology required intellectual capabilities that transcended conventional organizational structures. The annual budget for Jessica's research program had increased by orders of magnitude as congressional leaders recognized the strategic implications of her work for maintaining American advantages in precision warfare capabilities. Her pink unicorn rifle had become the symbol of a broader investment in technologies that would determine military effectiveness for decades to come, representing billions of dollars in research and development funding directed toward civilian contractors with advanced technical capabilities. Morrison's career trajectory had been fundamentally altered by his association with Jessica's program, his facility becoming a model for integration of civilian innovation with military training that was being studied and replicated throughout the defense establishment. His initial hostility toward Jessica had been transformed into a professional relationship that was advancing both their careers while contributing to revolutionary improvements in American military capabilities. The training results achieved by personnel using Jessica's systems were exceeding all previous performance standards by margins that challenged fundamental assumptions about human limitations in precision shooting. Her integration of advanced technology with systematic instruction was producing marksmen whose capabilities approached the theoretical limits of mechanical accuracy, suggesting that expert-level performance could be achieved by anyone with adequate training and appropriate equipment. Rodriguez's family had been profoundly affected by his transformation, his wife noting that his return from deployments was no longer marked by the psychological trauma that had characterized his earlier military service. His recognition that Jessica's technology would protect rather than replace human operators had resolved internal conflicts about technological advancement that had been causing stress in his personal relationships. The international implications of Jessica's work were becoming apparent as foreign governments sought to understand and counter American advances in precision warfare capabilities. Her innovations were contributing to strategic advantages that would influence global military balance for decades, making her continued research a matter of national security that required the highest levels of protection and support. Torres's marksmanship instruction had been revolutionized by his study of Jessica's techniques, his students achieving performance levels that would have been considered impossible using traditional training methods. His classroom had become a pilgrimage destination for instructors from throughout the military community who wanted to understand how civilian innovations could be integrated with conventional military training to produce unprecedented results. Kim's family relationships had been healed by his newfound appreciation for the educational values they had always emphasized, his parents' immigrant experience having prepared them to recognize and appreciate excellence regardless of its source or presentation. His military service had become a source of family pride rather than cultural tension as he learned to integrate rather than abandon the principles that had shaped his character. The technological specifications of Jessica's latest prototypes remained classified at levels that exceeded the security clearance of most personnel, but the performance results were becoming visible throughout the special operations community as her systems were deployed in operational environments. Her work was saving American lives in conflicts that remained secret while establishing technological precedents that would influence military effectiveness for generations. Johnson's personal relationships had improved dramatically as his aggressive posturing was replaced by genuine confidence based on competence and preparation rather than intimidation and dominance. His transformation had been noticed by family members who had endured years of behavior that reflected military culture rather than personal values, creating opportunities for healing that had seemed impossible during his earlier career. The legacy of Jessica's visit was becoming institutionalized through formal changes in training procedures, equipment procurement policies, and personnel evaluation criteria that would influence military culture long after her specific innovations had been superseded by even more advanced technologies. Her demonstration had proven that revolutionary improvements in capability could emerge from unexpected sources, creating organizational openness to civilian innovation that would accelerate future technological advancement. The morning that had begun with mockery and contempt, Chem military legend studied in leadership schools as an example of how prejudice and conventional thinking could blind even elite personnel to revolutionary advances in capability. Jessica Chen's pink unicorn rifle had become a symbol of the importance of intellectual humility and the danger of judging competence by appearance rather than performance. The transformation of individual personnel had been accompanied by broader changes in military culture that were making the entire special operations community more effective and more adaptable to technological change. Jessica's work had catalyzed evolution in thinking that extended far beyond marksmanship to include fundamental assumptions about training, leadership, and the sources of military effectiveness in an increasingly complex world. The future that Jessica had revealed was arriving faster than anyone had anticipated, driven by accelerating technological advancement and changing requirements for military effectiveness that demanded intellectual sophistication rather than traditional military virtues. Her visit had prepared Coronado Naval Base to lead rather than follow these changes, creating advantages that would benefit Americans. Military folds to special operations community continued adapting to the implications of Jessica's work. The pink unicorn rifle remained displayed in Morrison's office as a reminder that revolutionary advances in capability often arrive disguised as jokes, requiring intellectual humility and professional curiosity to recognize their true significance. The morning's entertainment had become military history, and its lessons would influence American defense capability long after everyone present had completed their military service. 5 years later, Jessica Chen stood before the Congressional Defense Appropriations Committee, her simple black business suit a stark contrast to the faded jeans and hiking boots she had worn that transformative morning at Coronado. The pink unicorn rifle rested in a place of honor at the Smithsonian Institute, displayed alongside other artifacts that had changed the course of American military history, but its legacy lived on in every precision shot fired by personnel trained with her revolutionary systems. The hearing room was packed with generals, defense contractors, and congressional staffers who understood that Jessica's testimony would influence billions of dollars in future military spending and potentially determine America's strategic advantages for the next generation. Her quiet demeanor remained unchanged despite the enormous responsibility resting on her shoulders, the same calm confidence that had carried her through ridicule and contempt now guiding her through the corridors of power where policy decisions shaped global security. Morrison sat in the gallery, his colonel's eagles recently replaced by the stars of a brigadier general, his career having been transformed by his association with Jessica's groundbreaking work. The facility he had once commanded with such rigid authority had become the premier testing center for advanced military technologies, attracting the brightest minds from universities and defense contractors around the world. His journey from hostile skeptic to devoted advocate had become a case study in leadership schools, demonstrating how intellectual humility could transform professional failure into unprecedented success. Rodriguez watched from the witness section, his own transformation from protective warrior to technology integration specialist having earned him recognition as one of the military's leading experts on human-machine interface systems. His testimony earlier that morning had detailed how Jessica's innovations had reduced combat casualties by 70% in operations where her systems were deployed, statistics that carried the weight of American lives saved and families that remained intact because of civilian genius disguised as children's toys. The committee chairman opened Jessica's testimony with words that would have seemed impossible just years earlier, acknowledging her as the principal architect of America's in precision warfare and the leading authority on integrating advanced technology with human capability. Her research had evolved far beyond the pink unicorn rifle to encompass entire systems of training, equipment, and tactical doctrine that were reshaping how America projected military power around the globe. Jessica's opening statement was characteristically modest, crediting the military personnel who had embraced her innovations despite their unconventional origins and acknowledging the collaborative nature of work that had transformed individual inspiration into institutional capability. Her voice carried the same measured professionalism that had characterized her presentation at Coronado, but now she spoke with the authority of someone whose ideas had been validated through real-world application in the most demanding environments imaginable. Torres attended virtually from Afghanistan, where he was training local forces using techniques that Jessica had developed specifically for rapid skill transfer in combat environments. His own journey from skeptical sniper to international instructor had taken him to conflicts around the world, carrying Jessica's methodologies to allies who needed to achieve expert-level performance with minimal training time. The pride in his voice as he described success rates that exceeded all previous standards reflected the personal transformation that had accompanied his professional evolution. Kim's presence in the hearing room represented his new role as Jessica's principal military liaison, his cultural background and technical education having prepared him for bridging the gap between civilian innovation and military application. His family watched proudly from the gallery, their immigrant experience having taught them to recognize excellence regardless of its packaging, validation that their son had finally learned to appreciate the values they had always emphasized. The technical demonstration that Jessica conducted for the committee used equipment that looked nothing like the pink unicorn rifle but incorporated all the principles that had made her original system so revolutionary. Her latest prototype was sleek and professional, designed for military aesthetics while maintaining the technological sophistication that had transformed American precision warfare capabilities. The evolution from toy-like appearance to military standard reflected her understanding that acceptance required addressing psychological as well as technical requirements. Johnson testified about his own transformation from aggressive intimidator to methodical professional, his story serving as evidence of how Jessica's innovations had changed not just equipment and techniques but the fundamental culture of military units that embraced her approach. His family relationships had been rebuilt around principles of respect and collaboration rather than dominance and aggression. Personal changes that reflected broader cultural evolution within the military community. The request that Jessica presented to the committee was staggering in its scope, encompassing research programs that would influence American military capability for decades to come. Her work had expanded beyond individual weapons to include integrated systems that connected soldiers, equipment, and command structures in ways that multiplied rather than simply enhanced human capability. The investment she requested would ensure American technology superiority while reducing the human cost of military operations around the world. Congressional questions revealed the global implications of Jessica, with foreign governments desperately seeking to understand and counter American advantages that seemed to violate fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness. Her innovations had created strategic imbalances that were influencing diplomatic relationships and alliance structures, making her continued research a matter of national security. Transcending traditional defense spending considerations. The classified briefing that followed Jessica's public testimony included performance data that would have seemed fictional before her demonstration at Coronado, with accuracy rates and engagement speeds that approached the theoretical limits of physics and human capability. Her integration of artificial intelligence with human judgment was producing results that exceeded what either could achieve independently, representing evolution rather than replacement of military expertise. Morrison's private conversation with Jessica after the hearing reflected the mutual respect that had developed between former adversaries, his initial hostility having been transformed into professional admiration and personal friendship. Their collaboration had produced innovations that neither could have achieved independently, demonstrating that diversity of perspective was essential for breakthrough thinking in complex technical fields. The medal ceremony that concluded Jessica's Washington visit was attended by personnel from around the world who had been trained using her techniques. Their presence testimony to the global impact of work that had begun with the Pink Unicorn rifle and a room full of skeptical warriors. The Presidential Medal of Freedom that she received recognized not just technical achievement but the broader transformation of a military culture that her role had catalyzed. Rodriguez's final report, Casualty Reduction in Operations Using Jessica's Systems, contained statistics that would influence military procurement decisions for generations, proving that civilian innovation could save more lives than any conventional military advancement. His own family's relief at his safer deployments reflected broader changes in military families who no longer faced the constant anxiety that had characterized previous generations of military service. The research facility that Jessica now directed employed hundreds of personnel from diverse backgrounds, creating an environment where conventional military thinking was constantly challenged by perspectives from academia, industry, and international partners. Her leadership stayed the same quiet confidence that had carried her through initial ridicule, proving that authentic competence could overcome any obstacle if supported by adequate resources and institutional commitment. Torres's international training programs were spreading Jessica's methodologies to allied forces around the world, creating networks of expertise that enhanced American security while building relationships based on shared capability rather than traditional power dynamics. His transformation from skeptical observer to global ambassador reflected the personal growth that Jessica's work had inspired in everyone who embraced her innovations. The legacy of that foggy morning at Coronado was now enshrined in military doctrine, training procedures, and procurement policies that would influence American defense capability for decades to come. Jessica's Pink Unicorn rifle had become a symbol of the importance of intellectual humility and the danger of conventional thinking in rapidly changing environments where success required constant adaptation and openness to revolutionary ideas. Kim's wedding was attended by Jessica and many of the personnel who had witnessed her original demonstration, that gathering serving as a reunion of individuals whose lives had been transformed by events that had seemed so trivial at the time. His bride was a fellow engineer who appreciated both his military service and his technical expertise, representing the integration of personal and professional values that Jessica's influence had made possible. The final image of Jessica's story was her return to Coronado for the facility's annual Innovation Symposium, where she was greeted not with mockery but with the respect due someone who had revolutionized American military capability through persistence, competence, and the courage to present revolutionary ideas despite their unconventional packaging. The transformation from contempt to remorse was complete, but her work continued advancing American security in ways that would protect future generations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.